Have y'all read the Twitter files lately? I think there was a lot of just criticism about the Twitter files for being somewhat of a nothing burger, because it did kind of get off to a slow start. It was very much like Hunter x Hunter season 1. It's just you got to get through like 19 episodes before it actually gets good, and then it's pretty incredible. But I do think there is some tact to the way the information is being disseminated. Part 1 definitely kind of just like lays this foundation for everything else to build upon. And when we really get into parts 3, 4, and 5, when it covers Trump's banning, that's when you kind of get into the juicier parts of it. So in this video, I'm just going to go quickly, or as quickly as I humanly can, and just run through everything that was said over parts 1 to 5. I might actually break this up into 2 videos. We'll see. We'll see how long I go. But before we start this video off, why don't we take a minute to hear from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by emotionsforethan.org. Emotions for Ethan is a person that I don't necessarily like. He is a person that I do know who is heavily autistic and only likes to talk about crypto. He has a female cat named Guy, which he thinks is, I guess, cute and quirky, but he wouldn't know quirky if it was bludgeoning him over the head to death. Cool joke, man. It's a different gender. We get it. It's not interesting. And not unlike his lack of feline naming choices, he's also lacking in any kind of social skills whatsoever, which brings us to emotionsforethan.org. If you go to emotionsforethan.org, you can see this one picture of him. It's the only picture I have because he doesn't like to take pictures. And then you can see like a description of what we're gonna, of our mission statement, if you will. I would like to raise at least $600,000 this year to go towards my research and trying to find emotions for this buffoon. So if you just click that donate button, donate it's hundreds of thousands of your own money to my campaign, which will definitely go to finding emotions for this tard. Part 1. Hunter Biden's Laptop by Matt Taibbi. So as I mentioned, things would start off fairly slowly. It's around tweet 8 from this first thread where we start actually getting into some of the information. The rest is all kind of just introductory shit. So I'm just going to skip over like as much stuff as I humanly can. I'll just try to include anything that's like actually pertinent. It says, by 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive would write to another, quote, more to review from Biden team. The reply would come back, quote, handled. And if we look at this screenshot we see from internal like messages in between Twitter executives, it would list a bunch of tweets that they wanted taken down from the FBI, which, is not great. I mean, you don't want the FBI, unless if it's like something outwardly illegal, like, pornographic material involving children or, actual calls to violence or something like that. Unless if it's something outwardly illegal like that, you kind of don't want government being involved with how people can express themselves, especially over the internet. Celebrities and unknowns alike could be removed or reviewed at the behest of a political party. So here's a screenshot here. So I grabbed the first one under SI, defer to safety on the high profile second one. So you can see like James Woods has a tweet taken down at the behest of the U.S. government, aka the FBI, as well as Stephen Lujan. Now, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing at the Democratic Party here, but it is stated quite clearly in here that both parties did have access to these tools, so both sides of the aisle definitely were playing the same game, that is for sure, and I don't think that's good on either side. I think any like Republicans that were doing the same thing, that should also be condemned. But the problem and the argument here is that if you look, I mean, in 2018, 2020, and 2022, almost 99%, on average, let's call it 97.5% of all donations from Twitter employees went to Democrats and not Republicans. So yes, both parties had access to the same tools, but there was a lot more open doors and lines of contact and lines of dialogue that could be opened by Democrats as compared to Republicans, which is why for the longest time you would see people on social media saying that Republicans weren't, people that had more Republican views weren't getting a fair shake and were being shadow banned, et cetera, for saying things that, were kind of counter to Democrat ideology. And then for the longest time that was being denied, but then you see this and you're like, well, okay, well maybe. So the centerpiece of this first thread really revolves around the New York Post releasing the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. If you're unfamiliar with Hunter Biden's laptop story, I'll try and give you like the TLDR. Essentially what happened is that Hunter Biden is a crack addict. His dad is probably really abusive, possibly sexually abusive if you've seen the way he smells little people. And I don't mean midgets. I should have just said children. Please don't kill me. So anyways, Hunter brought his computer to this computer repair shop. And then he just left it there, never picked it up. The computer repair shop actually contacted the FBI and was like, hey, I think I've got some high-ranking political party's laptop. I think you guys should probably have this. I don't think I should have this. And they just didn't do anything about it. I'm not sure exactly what he did. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it ended up into the hands of the New York Post. The New York Post went through the laptop, went through emails of Hunter Biden. So the New York Post releases this story 3 weeks before the election, and it causes a bit of a shitstorm online. People are talking about corruption, et cetera, and the Democrats want to suppress this story. So in tweet number 18, Twitter took extraordinary steps to suppress the story, removing links and posting warnings that it may be, quote, unsafe. They even blocked its transmission via direct message. So even if the messages you were sending were not public, you weren't even allowed to talk about this story. So we're talking about Twitter specifically here, but just to be clear, at the time, this story was being suppressed across the board on every social media app. Mainstream news, if they were left-leaning, which is most mainstream news organizations, were not talking about it at all. They were just trying to bury this thing, pretend it didn't happen, as well as Twitter did go a step further and ban the New York Post's account. They even suspended the White House spokeswoman, Kayleigh McEnany, for sharing it. Then Twitter's public policy director, Carolyn Storm, reached out to Twitter with a bit of a WTF moment, saying hey, why are you banning the Speaker of the House? That seems crazy. The comms team responded by saying the user was bounced by site integrity for violating our hacked materials policy, even though this wasn't a hack at all. It was Hunter Biden leaving his laptop at a computer repair shop because he was smoking crack and forgot about it, and there was, the government documents on it, and then that was sold to some media company. The decision was made at the highest levels of the company, but without the knowledge of then CEO Jack Dorsey, with former head of legal policy and trust Vijaya Gadde playing a key role, and she will play a key role throughout this entire story. There was an internal debate at the time as to how to actually handle this story, because in the US, there's a law called Section 230. Section 230 protects websites from essentially being legally liable for anything on the platform. Because there's so much information being dumped onto websites, especially public websites like a Twitter or any kind of social media, it's literally impossible to get rid of all of it. So what's happened over the past 20 years, essentially, with these social media websites is they've donated enough money to, government officials to play both sides. They are moderating content more and more and more, whilst at the same time continuing to be protected by Section 230. So like I said, at the time, there's this internal struggle at the website. Basically, kind of a debate is going on if they're pushing the limits too far on what they can do as far as content moderation before just becoming a publisher. And that gets illustrated here in the exchange between Democratic Congressman Ro Khan and Vijaya Gadde, as he warns her, generating huge backlash on the Hill regarding speech. Happy to chat if you're up to it. Vijaya replies, thank you for reaching out, and we appreciate the heads up. We put out a clarifying thread of tweets earlier this evening to explain our policy around the posting of private information and linking directly to hacked materials. Once again, it was not hacked. The press secretary's account was not permanently suspended. We requested that she delete the tweet containing material that is in violation of our rules, and her account is restricted until she complies, to which Khan replies, hope you're well, Vijaya, but this seems a violation of the First Amendment principles. If there is a hack of classified information or other information that could expose a serious war crime and the New York Times was to publish it, I think the New York Times should have that right. A journalist should not be held accountable for the illegal actions of the source unless they actively aided the hack. So, to restrict the distribution of that material, especially regarding a presidential candidate, seems not in the keeping of the principles of New York Times v. Sullivan. I say this as a total Biden partisan and convinced he didn't do anything wrong. But the story now has become more about censorship than relatively innocuous emails, and it's become a bigger deal than it would have been. It also is now leading to some serious efforts to curtail Section 230, many of which would have been a mistake. I believe Twitter itself should curtail what it recommends or puts in trending news, and your policy against QAnon groups is all good. It's a hard balance. But in the heat of a presidential campaign, restricting dissemination of newspaper articles, even if New York Post is far right, it seems like it will invite more backlash than it will do good. Please keep this communication between us and Jack, and no need to CC the team or forward to them. Just wanted to offer my 2 cents. And I think that's a completely base take. I don't really know Rose politics, but I mean, that seems like a pretty level-headed, fair take on the situation, something I would completely agree with. Part 2, Twitter's Blacklist by Bari Weiss. So part 1 kind of covers the whole New York Times Hunter Biden laptop story. There was a story about Hunter Biden's laptop. It got suppressed by Twitter. Part 2 is going to dive into basically talking about shadow banning. Shadow banning is a thing that has been talked about between real humans for quite a while now, and we all are kind of, I guess, under the agreement that it is correct and it is something that is happening on social media, but social media companies have denied it.
Are you censoring people?
No.
Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans. It's bad. Is that true?
No.
So starting off with this screenshot here, you could see that, so this is like the back end of Twitter, and you could see like tags that Twitter applies to people's tweets. So you can see the trends blacklist, meaning that this tweet isn't allowed to be trending. This is a doctor who was arguing against COVID lockdowns and the harm it could have on children. Or this popular right-wing talk show host, Dan Bongino. There's also popular right-wing political commentator Charlie Kirk. Twitter, or more specifically Vijaya, and Kayvon Bakur, head of product, said, quote, "We do not shadow ban, and we certainly do not shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology," which is clearly untrue and a lie. No, you see what they do is that they don't shadow ban. What they do is visibility filtering, or VF as it's called within the company, which is shadow banning with a different name. So that's their little dumb game that they play, their little semantics game, where it's like, well, no, we're not shadow banning people, but we are filtering them visibly. Yeah, it's the same exact thing as what everyone's calling it. You're just saying it's something different, so technically you're not lying. But I mean, you have to be brain dead to know that there's not a difference. Twitter created a team of stormtroopers to moderate high-ranking Twitter profiles. This team was called the Site Integrity Policy Escalation Support, also known as SIPPES. SIPPES. You know this was named by some overweight, septum-pierced, blue-haired mega dork.
It's really hard being triggered all the time, and I'm not kidding. It's all the time for me at this point. I get dressed in the morning, I'm triggered. I take a shower, I'm triggered. I get in the car.
You guys are terrible at naming things. Look at the LGBBBB. It's too many letters. There's too much going on. Any normal person isn't going to remember everything. Short and memorable. It's more poignant. And then look at this. Site integrity policy, policy escalation support. Why is policy there twice? That is dumb. Why is there a comma? That is dumb. Why did you replace the comma with a hyphen in the shortened version? That is dumb. Gen Z is retarded. Anyways, this super secret group was made up of our best friend Vijaya, as well as Yoel Roth, a member who is going to come into play very shortly, then CEO Jack Dorsey, and then COO Paraj Arjawal. So certain tweets would be tagged with a tag saying, "Do not take action on user without consulting with SIPPES." Illustrated here on a libs of TikTok tweet, meaning this was a high-profile account that could only be moderated or reviewed by this high-ranking Gestapo. Libs of TikTok would continually be suspended. I believe 7 times they'd be suspended for violating hateful conduct policies. But you could see here in this internal memo between SIPPET members, or SIPPES members rather, site policy recommends placing @libs of TikTok, 1.3 million followers not verified, in a 7-day timeout at the account level, meaning not for a specific tweet, based on the account's continued pattern of indirectly violating Twitter's hateful conduct policy by tweeting content that either leads to or intends to incite harassment against individuals and institutions that support LGBT communities. At this time, site policy has not found explicitly violative tweets, which would result in a permanent suspension of the account. So, I mean, I think that's pretty clear there that Libs of TikTok specifically was continually being suspended for essentially a handful of employees' opinion of the account, and not for actually anything that they did. They didn't do anything wrong. It was just there was patterns being perceived that could be possibly wrong in the future, and they might be inciting other accounts to be wrong possibly, but we have no proof of that because it doesn't violate any of our policies. Ergo, we need to suspend you anyways because we know better than you and other people in the world. Bari Weiss then juxtaposed that with Libs of TikTok being doxxed on Twitter. Her name was revealed as well as a photo of her home, including the address. And that tweet posted at the time had garnered 10,000 likes and was not removed, which is a clear violation not only of Twitter's rules, but of the law. Doxing is illegal. And when the Libs of TikTok creator reached out to Twitter, this is the response she got. "Hello, thanks for reaching out. We reviewed the reported content and didn't find it to be in violation of the Twitter rules, even though it clearly is. In this case, no action will be taken at this time. If you have any further concerns about intellectual property, your privacy, or your personal safety, the following guidelines can be of assistance," etc. So the argument of like, oh, Twitter's a private company, could do whatever they want, like, no, I mean, there's actual, like, if you want to make the argument that, you know, some of the rhetoric that people on the right are espousing can be considered, you know, hate and actual violence towards people. I mean, this is like literally laws are being broken here and Twitter's refusing to do anything about it. And to cap off this final section of part number 2, we have some internal Slack messages from Yoel Roth. Yoel Roth was the global head of trust and safety at Twitter. We mentioned him before. So here's some private Slack messages from him. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. A lot of times SI has used technicality spam enforcements as a way to solve a problem created by safety under enforcing their policies. And then 6 days later, another Slack message would say, "One of the biggest areas I'd love research support on is regarding non-removal policy interventions like disabling engagements and de-amplification/visibility filtering." That is shadow banning, if you forgot. The hypothesis underlying much of what we've implemented is that if exposure to example misinformation directly causes harm, we should use remediations that reduce exposure, and limiting the spread/virality of content is a good way to do that. So the gist of what he just said was essentially that they use technicalities in their policies to ban people or suppress speech that they don't like. And again, you know, that isn't equal across the board. That is completely one-sided politically. And then they also want to rework a bunch of policies at Twitter so they essentially could have more control. This video is a little longer than I expected, so I'm going to stop here and then join me in a few days where I will talk about parts 3, 4, and 5.